State Representative Mike Dovilla, welcome back to Message from the House.
Thanks, Olivia. Good to be with you.
Back here in Columbus this spring. Are you excited? How's the day been so far?
I am. It's good.
Yeah.
It was people have asked how my break has been over the last number of weeks, and I just laugh at them. I said I haven't had a break. It's been it was a lot of Navy work.
Yeah.
I was off doing some of that duty for a while, and traveling the district and working policy issues back here still. So not a break, but good to be back from whatever that was.
I know, right? It's either you're in your home district or you're in Columbus working, not so much.
Right.
Not so much a break. Well, we're happy to have you back. We're here to talk about a big topic, the allegations of Medicaid fraud, highlighted mainly by the Daily Wire in a series of articles recently. I first just want to ask you to walk us through these allegations for folks who might not be aware and just give your initial reaction to them.
Sure. Well, and this is just the most recent sort of flavor of Medicaid fraud, waste, and abuse that we're witnessing here in the state of Ohio, and frankly in other states across the country, although we're probably the most Republican state where we've seen these types of instances of activity taking place. So in this particular instance, there are a number of buildings just a few miles from here that are full of businesses that don't really exist and that have their names on the door, and they indicate that they're home health care agencies of some kind. Nobody there, the service isn't actually being provided, and yet the dollars are flowing from taxpayers to these shell companies. In many cases, in the instances around here, they're run by Somalis or other foreign entities that are here, and we don't really know what's happening with the dollars once they get there. But there's some likelihood that they're probably flowing overseas from there to places that don't like us very much in this country. And all that's being paid right out of the taxpayer's pocket, which makes it an even more egregious scenario that we're looking at. So that's the most recent example, but this goes back a ways, of course.
I want to ask for, the basic listener, how is this even possible that this is happening?
Yeah, well, it's a lack of accountability structure when it comes down to it. And a lot of folks have jumped up and down over the course of the longer term investigation that I think we'll talk about a little bit here today as well, and said, well, isn't there a law that deals with this? There are a lot of laws that deal with this. There are a lot of regulations that deal with this. What it comes down to is enforcement, and where the law has been broken, prosecution. And, I do a lot of work in civics education. It's an area that I did my doctoral work on. It's something that I'm personally passionate about. And I'm often asked about these things. And what it reveals to me is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the different branches of government and the different components of government work. Because they come to me and say, well, Representative, why have you not prosecuted this situation? I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not in law enforcement. I'm in the legislative branch of government. I'm here to help make the laws. That's my job in the process. It's the job of the executive branch, whether it's in the judicial process of prosecuting or of the enforcement mechanism, and to faithfully execute the laws that are on the books. It's their job to do that part of it, and that's where this is falling down.
And I want to ask, even just focusing on last week when these articles first started coming out, you read the first one, you read the second one, you read the third one, and beyond. What were your initial reactions?
Anger. I mean, that was my initial reaction to it, just being hot angry about the whole thing. And I've said to people, because I represent a pretty moderate district in southwestern Cuyahoga County, it's like a 52-48 on the index. I'm used to having that. I used to have a 50-50 in the old days when I was roughly in this same seat. But if you could be a bleeding heart liberal, as they say, on the left end of the spectrum, who really believes in the efficacy and the importance of social service, welfare programs in the country. And you ought to be angry about the fact that dollars that are supposed to be going to the least among us who need this type of support, those dollars are being siphoned off for illegitimate purposes. And if you're a fiscal conservative like me, who believes in smaller size and scope and spending within government, having a government that fits within the size of our Constitution, whether at the state level or federally, then you should be angry about that as well, because it's waste, fraud, and abuse that's going on here. So I think it's, as they say these days, it's a 90-10 issue, or probably north of that even. No matter what your politics are, you should be really angry about the fact that we're being robbed blind by people who don't like us very much and have come to the country. Most people over the years, my family's a family of immigrants, all of ours are. Most people came to the country to realize their own version of the American dream. And these people are coming here instead to rob the American people blind. And to do it with our money, which makes it even worse. They're taking taxpayer dollars and siphoning them off for bad purposes.
I think a lot of the questions that we have been getting and the reactions are, what are we doing about it, right? First, how is this happening? Second, what are you all doing about it? I want to bring up the budget and the provisions that you fought for that were included in this most recent budget. Kind of talk me through what those were and how they fight against the fraud.
Sure. So that was kind of an earlier version of what we came across when we started looking at Medicaid eligibility issues. So we had been working to get the budget out of the House, and something had been flagged for me around probably February or March of last year from a constituent in the district saying, hey, you need to look at some of these eligibility concerns related to the asset verification limit for people who are on Medicaid. There's an asset ceiling of $2,000 in a liquid bank account, checking or savings. And LexisNexis, the subcontractor that works with the Ohio Department of Medicaid, has access to that data. They actually have access, I think, to over 90% of these types of accounts for all of us across the country, which on one hand is a little bit scary, but on the other hand, gives us really good fidelity in terms of what's actually being carried in people's bank accounts. I ended up having to wait until the budget was out of the House just because I was really busy working on it in my role as the vice chairman of the Finance Committee. But on April 10th, I sent a letter over to LexisNexis to ask for an explanation of what was going on. And I wanted to just get these numbers right. They came back to us and they indicated that their process verified 56% of enrollees, and of those verified, only 29% actually failed liquid asset checks. So this is just a portion of the whole population of age-blind disabled, the main population of Medicaid that it was even looked at. And then a significant portion, almost a third of those, failed the asset checks. What they found beyond that was over 21,000 people had more than $20,000 in liquid assets, almost 4,000 people had over $100,000 in liquid assets, and 12 people had more than $1 million in a bank account. I don't know why you keep $1 million in a bank account anyway, given what interest rates are these days, but that's a lot of money to be carrying. And so we're not talking about people here who have put money somewhere else in a trust in order to protect it and to keep it off the books for Medicaid. These are people who are just carrying the money right in their bank account and are still receiving a Medicaid benefit. So I went into a back and forth then in the form of letters with the then director of the Ohio Department of Medicaid, Maureen Corcoran, and said, can you explain what's going on here? And I've been doing this for a long time, Olivia. I mean, I think I got involved in politics in the early 1990s, so I've been around quite a while on the public policy and political side of things. I've never received such a high level of obfuscation from any public official, whether elected or appointed, in all the years that I've been doing this. She effectively told me, Representative, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand this. This is complicated, which I agree with. It's very complicated. But she basically dismissed all of my concerns and requests for validation. So where we landed on this is I introduced House Bill 356 as the budget was moving through the process, and I intended to move this as a separate measure. It would have, under the way that it was crafted, and this ended up being folded into the budget, required an audit of the age-blind disabled population of Medicaid, the main traditional population, require the office, the ODM, Ohio Department of Medicaid, to release all the data for that population so that the auditor of state could actually review it, and then provided a $5 million appropriation to the auditor's office so you wouldn't have to just pay for something unanticipated out of Hyde for the year. We were successful in the conference committee on the budget in getting that into House Bill 96. And I was actually amazed, and I think I tweeted on this just yesterday. I was shocked, actually, that this governor, who had vetoed two prior types of provisions related to release of data from ODM, did not line item veto my bill that I was able to include in the budget. So it's law, and Auditor Faber and his senior team sat down with me probably within a week or two after the budget was effective to talk about what their plan was going to be for carrying this out. We're now a number of months later. Things take a while to go through a population this large, but I have it on good authority and get good updates from them with some frequency that audit is moving forward. I think we're going to find substantial findings that come out of this, like in the $1 billion plus range in terms of dollars that are being siphoned off for people who don't need this because they have that much money sitting in a bank account. So I know that's a long answer, but that's sort of the explanation of where have we been over the last about 13 months or so.
And I think you did a good job summarizing that, in addition to bringing up that you have been in the political arena working on Medicaid fraud for a very long time. For folks who might not have the backstory, when did your concern or your attention to this really start, and Has this been a long-term issue? Obviously, we see the article last week, but I can imagine it's been a long time coming.
Sure, it has. And I went back recently because I recalled that in 2013, when the Group 8 expansion of Medicaid was the hot issue around here in that budget, I went back and just checked out my floor speech. And I dedicated most of those remarks on the floor. This is back when we gave longer speeches on the floor. We don't see so much of this anymore. It was like 11-minute speech.
Oh, wow.
But I'm a policy wonk and I like to get into the details of things. But I devoted most of that set of remarks on the floor to my opposition to Medicaid expansion at that point in time. And there was an amendment that was being considered that day that was passed ultimately in a bipartisan way to have a little bit more time to investigate a different way ahead on it than just blanket allowing expansion to go ahead, which was what then Governor Kasich wanted to do. Ultimately, unfortunately, it was taken out of our hands and placed in the hands of the controlling board, which had a swap out of members on it in order to get the thing passed. And so they jammed it through there as essentially an end run around the legislature, which is not the best practice of doing business around this place, as far as I'm concerned, or a lot of other people are concerned. So that was really when I started looking at this issue pretty closely. And that was my second term, the first time that I sat in this seat. That's over 13 years ago. And so when I came back in this time around, I really wanted to start focusing early on major budgetary issues. And part of that is, again, the role that I have in the leadership team here in terms of the vice chairmanship. But it's a huge part of our budget. We're talking about almost half of our state budget is going into, and that's just the state portion, not the all funds, is going into this particular program. The taxpayers of this state and those of us who represent them have every right to have a better understanding and a clear understanding of what is going on and how our money is being spent on this particular program.
And you mentioned the impact on taxpayers. You know, we hear taxpayers, we pay taxes. I think explain the gravity of it and who's ultimately getting the tax dollars behind the scenes of all of this.
Sure. Well, if you put this in the context of a big piece of dialogue that has occurred around this building over the last nearly year and a half with respect to real estate taxes here, and the very real conversation that's taking place around the state, both by people who are circulating petitions for a constitutional amendment to eliminate property taxes in this state, and just by rank and file residents, all of us. I mean, the amount of money I pay for my little house and piece of property in Berea is incredible. And I don't know that I get value for that out of Cuyahoga County or the various different elements that have their hand in my pocket in order to pay for some element of government. People are upset with that right now, and rightfully so. But every budget, every balance sheet has two sides to it. The revenue side, which is really what we've been talking about so much with the tax side, and the expenditure side. And I've said in other forums over the last number of months, we have a spending addiction, both in this country and here in this state. And even under unified Republican leadership, so-called, over the past number of years, this budget has continued to grow and grow and grow. And so we have to get to a point now where we take action on the expenditure side as well. And I have a separate bill that will have a second hearing just later today in the Finance Committee on zero-based budgeting, which has a completely different assumption in terms of how we do budgeting from incremental, which is we'll take last year's budget, tack on X percent because government always has to grow, right? That's the way everything goes, inflation and programmatic growth. Well, no, it doesn't. So zero-based comes from a different approach, which is under this bill, every 10 years, every agency of government would have to strip the entire budget back to zero, justify all of its programs, all of its initiatives, its existence, and demonstrate to us in a tangible way why it even needs to exist anymore. So if we can get the spending side of the ledger under control, we start to really ease the revenue side of things, whether it's we've lowered income taxes in this state. Some of that's been paid for on the sales tax side, but property tax continues to go up. It doesn't all need to go up in perpetuity if we get spending under control.
Representative, thank you so much for coming back on.
My pleasure.
To talk about this quickly, you can follow us on the Ohio House GOP Caucus on Facebook, Ohio House _GOP on Instagram, OHR GOP Caucus on Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Representative Mike Dovilla, thank you again.
Thanks, Olivia.